My name is Barbara Schrettke. I would like to also start with thanking the sponsors or the partners in this venture, the Royal African Society, the Anglo-Ethiopian Society, and the Global Heritage Fund UK. I have the great honor to introduce you to the speakers tonight. And of course, ladies first. Angela Raven Roberts has a lifelong connection and commitment to Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa. She has lived and worked through 3 regimes in Ethiopia and returns regularly on various research and work assignments. Her career spans 30 years of work with the United Nations, NGOs, and academia in the humanitarian and development sector. Educated in the United States of America and the United Kingdom, Dr. Raven Roberts holds a PhD in anthropology and development from the University of Minnesota, a master's degree in social anthropology from Oxford, and a bachelor's degree from this illustrious organization, the Haile Selassie. She is currently a research associate at the Institute of Gender Studies at Lady Margaret Hall and Department of Education in Oxford, working on capacity development, specializing on the role of national civil service, CERS plural, in disaster preparedness and reviewing current educational policies for pastoral communities in the Horn of Africa. Anthony Mockler's famous book, Haile Selassie's War, the Italian-Ethiopian Campaign from 1935 to 1940, has been called a triumph of scholarship, conciseness, and cohesion, of order over chaos by the Translatory Supplement, and a brilliant record of the almost forgotten Anglo-Italian struggle for Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa by the Times. But how do I introduce our main speaker tonight? It depends very much on which hat I'm wearing. As the chair of the trustees of the Ginkgo Library, a charitable project promoting dialogue between the Middle East and North Africa and the West, I can proudly introduce him as our advisor, who is uniquely qualified to guide our project in matters of interfaith dialogue, as he, as probably most of you know, as Lich Asarate is the great-grandson of Empress Menen Aswa, and therefore a descendant of the royal house of Wolof and of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon his name. The title of his autobiography, Ein Prinz aus dem Hause David und warum in Deutschland blieb, refers to his lineage, which links him to Menelik I, the legendary son of King David and the Queen of Sheba. As he combines both lineages with being a member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Asfa was the obvious choice as chairman of Pactum Africanum, the Alliance for the Promotion of the Abrahamic Dialogue in Africa. Now I put my other hat on. As fellow historian, I can introduce him as Dr. Prinz Asfa-Wossen Asserate, and his publisher, who also happens to be a fellow German. I am even more proud to introduce him as the winner of the Adalbert von Camiso Prize, a unique literary prize awarded to a book written in German by somebody whose native language is not German. This year, he topped this by being awarded the Jakob Grimm Prize, which is awarded for services to the German language. I'm not going to bore you with the awards sort of praise, but I just think it is quite incredible that he would be awarded both prizes. And especially as they praise his delightfully humorous prose, something that should appeal to the English language readership, and therefore we decided to translate his book into English. This is the first book of Asfa's which has been translated into English, and it is the biography of his great uncle Haile Selassie, which we are launching tonight, and it might win a similar prize for honours to the English language if such a prize existed. But somehow the English are not as surprised as we Germans if somebody speaks the language flawlessly and studies at the top university in this country. Or is that the other place? Maybe he will receive, however, a prize for Project E, which is Ethiopia, Education and English. But I'm most proud to introduce him as Rebecca's brother, who Rebecca brought to my little bookshop in 2006, and who in the years since has become my friend. So thank you, Rebecca. And over to Asfa.
Well, what can I say now? But thank you, my dear Barbara. It's great to be here. It's great to be in London, and I'm very proud of becoming one of your authors. And I sincerely hope this is the first and not the last book. And a good friend of mine today said perhaps House might even decide on publishing the Amharic edition of this book. I know you have done Arabic and Farsi translations up to now, and why not Amharic one of these days? And we will have House Publishing in Addis Ababa. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to see so many of you coming here on this foggy day. It took me 4.5 hours yesterday delay to get from Frankfurt to London. And I'm afraid there are some of us there were many friends from Norfolk and other places who wanted to come, but the fog is so thick that they were afraid they might not be able to return home. But it's a full house, and what more does an author want? I'm terribly pleased to see very old friends from Cambridge, from Ethiopia, from my childhood days. My entire family is here, my cousins, my aunts. God knows, many, many friends and many new friends, I hope. And I hope we will have a nice evening, and this will not be an evening of monologue, but of dialogue, that we will exchange ideas and see if we get any nearer to this fascinating human being called Haile Selassie I, a man who has left his mark on the 20th century.
Before going on to His Majesty, I would just like to say a few words about Asfa-Wossen's family, which is no news, no doubt, to almost everybody here, but maybe news to a few people. That's to say, his grandfather was Ras Kassa, and Ras Kassa had 4 sons, of whom 3 were shot by the Italians after the Italian invasion in December 1936. Just much one doesn't Kassa was captured by a Wallo banda, the Italian officers, near the Takazi River, and was shot. That was, I suppose, a military engagement, so not so bad. This was, of course, during the beginnings of the resistance. Then Abera and Asfa-Wossen Kassa were trapped by General Traccia in Fike, and treacherously shot in the marketplace at Fike in December 1936. And as I'm sure all of you know, those at least were shot by the Italians, by recognized enemies, whereas Ras Asarate, Asfa-Wossen's father, was shot by his own countrymen in the notorious massacre in November 1974. So much for, unfortunately for Asfa-Wossen, he'd been sent, as is mentioned in this book, by his father, despite wanting to stay behind and sort of see things through. He'd been sent back to Germany, which, as things worked out, is just as well. Now, getting on to Haile Selassie, I'd like to begin by asking Asfa-Wossen about Haile Selassie's personal life, about which we hear very little, really. There was one fascinating point I picked up in the book, which was that shortly after his coronation, and by the way, today is not only All Souls' Day, but the 85th anniversary of His Majesty's coronation, which is perhaps worth remembering and drinking a toast to later on. But there's a fascinating bit in Asfa-Wossen's book where he mentions that the emperor was possibly considering, shortly around the period of his coronation, leaving his wife, the Empress Menon, for the beautiful daughter, whom I'd never heard of the beautiful sister of Rasael, the daughter of Ras Mangasha, therefore. Asfa-Mangasha. And Menon said, well, if he wants to leave me, I've always had a passion for Ras Haile.
The other way round. The other way round.
Which seemed to be quite extraordinary. There's also an interesting point that I hadn't quite got till I looked at the family tree in the back of Asfa-Wossen's book, and there's really no reference to this in your book, about his first marriage and his daughter, Princess Romani, work, and his grandchildren, Samson Bayani married. And I know nothing about them or the background to that. So perhaps you could begin by talking about the family life of Haile Selassie, avoiding perhaps the Crown Prince, which comes in later.
Well, as far as his first marriage is concerned, it was his. He married at a very young age, and out of that marriage came Princess Romanov, who had two sons, and they had sons, and I think one of the sons should be here today, Celestia, but I haven't seen him yet. That is the first one, but of course then Lijiyasu wanted to pull him, because he had always heard that Ras Makonden's son might be the new leader of Ethiopia. And he wanted that some way or the other he should, although they were rivals, but somehow or the other, this man, this new young man, should be pulled into the family. And so he gave his niece to the emperor. She was married to and he took her from there, and this was an official political marriage, you could say, which then became a really great love affair. One has to say that. They were incredibly close. And so he married Empress Menon, out of which came 6 children. As far as this little episode is concerned with Zoroaster, Gesha, she was an incredibly beautiful woman, there's no doubt about it, and the emperor was a young man, don't forget, at that time, 1930, so no doubt he might have considered. But at the end, I think my grandfather also played a role in this, saying this cannot be done, she has stuck up to you all the time, and you cannot do this. And somehow they two got together, and the whole thing was worked out, and the Empress Menon joined him, and was crowned with him. By the way, an incredibly new thing in the history of Ethiopia. She was the first lady to be crowned as an equal with the Ethiopian emperor. This is the very first. And of course, very little is known about her, and I have tried to put a little bit about this wonderful woman who very few people have written about, and what she has done for Ethiopia, what she has done for Ethiopian women, including the establishment of the first school for women only. She was the first president of the Ethiopian Red Cross and played a vital role in helping the Ethiopian soldiers during the Second World War. So there's a lot to be, and I sincerely hope that some young scholars will take the Empress of Ethiopia as a subject, and hopefully it will be a lady scholar who will one day write a good biography of the late Emperor, Empress Mary. What about you, Angela? Wouldn't that be a good thing?
But I think that there's a lot of interest. I think it will come. There's a new generation out there, and I'm very interested in these topics. And in fact, there's a PhD from Michigan State University by the daughter of another quite famous Ethiopian, and her name is Heran Sitke Barhan. And she's done an excellent PhD on the whole issue that you mentioned on how marriages and the role of marriages, and therefore also the role of women. So we are getting there.
Yes, I mean, this is the most fascinating thing about Ethiopia. I think if there is one country in the whole of Africa where I don't think women need emancipation, it is Ethiopia. To be very honest with you, I would say that about most African countries, but specifically Ethiopia, I have to say. Women are incredibly emancipated. Don't forget, Ethiopia, the first Ethiopian constitution dates back to 1931. And from that day on, women and men had the same rights. Do you know when equal rights were given to women in Switzerland? In 1973. So we can be proud of that.
While we're on the subject of women, can you just tell us what actually happened to the beautiful Princess Asta?
You seem to be fascinated. I think she was married to Rasgetacho afterwards. After that is what happened to her, and she lived quite a long life. But she wasn't. Nobody touched her, or she wasn't put into exile. That was the end of the affair. But you know, you asked me about the emperor as a human being. Of course, as you know, I was a teenager, and when I left Ethiopia the last time in '74, I was in my 20s. I was 24 years of age when the revolution started. So whatever my relationship to the emperor, it was a familiar one. I didn't hold a governmental post. So I saw him all the time as the head of our family, as the great father of Ethiopia, father of our family. And whatever it was, there was one thing which you felt at any time when you were with him. He was the personification of the word dignity. I'll give you an example. I think there was only one time in my life when I saw the late emperor as an ordinary human being. He had come to Asmara in Eritrea when my father was Governor General. And one afternoon, he came to the private houses where my father was staying. And when he went through the drawing room, he saw a billiard table. And he wanted to play billiards. I can assure you there's not one Ethiopian human being, I don't think, who has ever seen an Ethiopian emperor holding a cue. His eyes went up. He took his jacket off, gave it to my father. Rasenmüller was there, and he said to him, "Now, old man, do you remember how we used to play snooker in the house of Lijigasu? Can you still do it?" Rasenmüller said, "I'll try." And he went. And then Rasenmüller said, "Asrate, you too, you have to come." So the emperor's jacket wandered off to me, and I was standing there. And within minutes, you would not imagine. He was playing snooker as a first-rate snooker specialist in Manchester. I was absolutely dumbfounded. He won, of course, the game against these two, a high mark, and then he dropped his cue. I gave him his jacket, and then within a minute, he was the Emperor of Ethiopia again. This was what he was, you know. And whoever met him, whether they were Europeans or whether Ethiopians or even Africans, Nelson Mandela calls him the African giant. And he says the first time he saw a man inspecting his troops, a black man inspecting black troops who were highly armed, highly modern. It was in the early 1960s when he came to Ethiopia. And he said, when I saw this man, this little man, with that fine face, full of dignity, I knew that we Africans were meant to win the war against colonialism. So he was stricken and smitten by him as much as other Europeans were. I think there are very few people who would be able to tell you more about the emperor's personal character. Perhaps my grandfather would have been in a better position to tell you more. My father, perhaps. But whatever it is, he was a unique personality who guided his people for over 60 years, both as regent and as emperor.
Could I switch gears very rapidly to, being a military historian myself? How would you define Haile Selassie as a war leader, in the sense that I think we can talk of three crises of his life, all three of which culminated in a battle. First of all, so to speak, the Ethiopian Wars of the Roses, the Wars of the Cousins, which culminated in the Battle of Sagale in, I think, 1916, between the Negus Mikhail of Wollo and the forces of, largely led by one Dr Kassa, or am I getting it?
My grandfather, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then the next battle, another crisis, the revolt of Rasputin and the Battle of the Plains of Ankim, which I don't think the emperor took part in directly. And of course, finally, the third great crisis, the Battle of Maichu, where he actually commanded the Ethiopian forces after the defeat of Ras Mulugeta.
Yes. Well, as far as the Battle of Sagale is concerned, I mean, the man of the day was undoubtedly Vitali Haptegiorgis, who led the Central Ethiopian Army. A fascinating man. You know, if King Michael had taken steps to go and fight Addis Ababa the minute he got news that his son had been banished, with 100,000 Wollo troops, he would have entered Addis Ababa without any problem, because there were not hardly any troops gathered. But this very wily Ethiopian war minister, he sent guns, ammunition, and he said, "My lord, do you really believe we, the servants of Menelik, are going to get rid of our dear Emperor Lijigasu? No, he's a young man and he has not been listening to what we said. Don't you worry, everything is in order." Whilst he was saying this, he was waiting for his troops from Gandabaret, from Wallagga, and from the other southern parts to come to Addis Ababa. So poor old King Michael decided to say, all right, everything is in order, and my son is not in terrible trouble, and he stayed in Wollo. And of course, once the troops reached Addis Ababa in 3-4 weeks' time. We had about 120,000 troops on this side and about 100,000 warrior troops on the other. And they met at the Battle of Sagale. The emperor, I have to say, was at that time as Ras Tafari, fought valiantly on one of the fronts. Very extremely courageous person. The other one was Ras Kassa, who then got hold of Ras Yazo, who was the Minister of War of Nicholas Mikhail. And there's even a nice ditty about it. Yazo bilut Ndabadosha, Yesostor Ras Asat Russia. Because it was only 3 months since Ras Kassa had been named Ras, and when he defeated Ras Yazo, just said that a Ras of 3 months has got a person who's called Getir. That's the name it was translated into. But Rastafari also played a very important role. Now, the Battle of Antrim, he had nothing to do with it. He was directing it from Addis Ababa. We should note it's the first battle in Ethiopian history where aeroplanes were used. It was the first time. I think it was the British, weren't they, who supplied us with 1 or 2 planes, but not many. And, I think they were only 2. But that was enough to sort of convince the Gondari troops who were on the side of the front that this was a terrible instrument. And so the Battle of Antrim did not last very long. Now we come to my job. Of course, this was the most disastrous campaign we ever had, and from the very beginning, it was clear who the losers would be. Ladies and gentlemen, we must not forget that throughout the Second World War, neither the Germans nor the Allied forces used gas. They had too many bad experiences during the First World War. So the only time that gas was used was in the Ethiopian campaign in 1936. And the results, as you beautifully mentioned in your book, were disastrous. And so there was no way that Ethiopia could ever have won that war, however hard they tried. There was another thing that played a very important role. We won the Battle of Adwa in 1896 because you had a united Ethiopian nation. I'm afraid, with my job, this was no longer the case. The amount of Ethiopians that died on their way back from my job to Addis Ababa was horrendous. Because the Raya and Zabo, and some people of the province of Wollo, wouldn't accept the fact that their leader, Jiyasu, had died. And they rebelled. They went against the Ethiopian troops. So that the emperor was forced, he could not go back through Dessie. He was forced to go to Lalibela and Fitchen and come back to Addis Ababa, the longer way.
And a final question from me, if I may, on this period. As you know, and as I think both you and I have recounted, when the emperor was debating whether he should leave Ethiopia or stay and either go to Cairo or face the Italians in Addis Ababa, Takele Walde Hawariat came into his presence and put a pistol in his own mouth, saying, "Janhoi, are you not the son of Theodore?" Now, what do you think was the right thing for His Majesty to have done? A difficult situation all round.
To be very honest with you, this is false gallantry. Everything was lost at that time. There was absolutely no hope to regain Ethiopian independence whilst the Ethiopian emperor being within Ethiopia. What did we have? We had lost most of the troops. We had no access to arms. Don't you forget, although we were the people who were invaded, the gracious League of Nations had forbidden any member to sell arms to Ethiopia. And of course, Italy was able to produce armaments themselves. So we were it was an incredible situation, and I think it was right that the emperor should go out to bring the case of Ethiopia to the League of Nations at that time. I don't think we had a true alternative. What good would it be to us if they had found him somewhere in Wallega or in Gore or anywhere and killed him? The entire Ethiopian resistance would have been diminished. So I'm very much in favor of his coming to Europe. And of course, these were his finest hours. The emperor in Geneva, the treatment he received was abominable. You mustn't forget, Adenauer, the Secretary General of the League of Nations, was quite a fascist, a great admirer of Hitler and Mussolini. He didn't allow him to do most of the things. They were even in the forefront. They didn't want him to speak because no head of state has ever spoken to the League of Nations, they said. And you're not allowed. And apart from everything else, the realpolitik says that Ethiopia is already invaded as under the Italian invasion. The fact that he managed to come and talk, that in itself was a great feat. And you mustn't forget, the minute he walked in, the fascist journalist started to whistle and to shout, and Adenauer, the president, didn't say a thing. We Ethiopians have a hero of that day. His name is Titulescu, who was the foreign minister of Romania. The only one delegate who stood up and said the famous words, Monsieur le Président, à la porte les sauvages. And it's only then that Adenauer reacted and threw these people out. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to give the speech he gave. A very historical speech, saying that this little match that has been lit in my country today will engulf Europe as a major disaster. And within 3 years, his prophecies came true. And what the emperor did after that, his life in Great Britain in exile, I can assure you, was not an easy thing at all. He had the heart of the British people. There's no doubt about it. British public voice was with the emperor. Unfortunately, the government wasn't. They declined to help him in every way. Even our great friend, Anthony Eden, started to relax. And there's a brilliant piece in Anthony's book, which I was glad to take over, in my book, about a meeting in the summer of 1936. The emperor had come to lobby the House of Commons, and the members were giving him tea on the terrace of the House of Commons. And then the Prime Minister suddenly appeared. He called the waiter and said, "Who are these people who are there?" He said, "Oh, these are members entertaining the Emperor of Ethiopia." He was too old to jump from the terrace because he did not want to shake his hand. So by the wit of a very clever waiter, he probably took a piece of cloth and hit him like this. He managed to escape. Baldwin did not want to shake hands with the Ethiopian emperor because he was not welcome. And they would have thrown him out if British public opinion was not in his favor. They would have done it a long time ago.